Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward. Breaking news out of Manitoba with an APTN exclusive of how the province is making a massive change to child welfare. Here's Melissa Ridgen with more.
I'm outside the legislature where Families Minister Heather Stefanson says this province is going to end the controversial practice of birth alerts.
We heard very loud and clear from through our Legislative Review Committee as well as the MMIWG inquiry, who both recommended the end of the practice of birth alerts. We also heard from the Grand Chiefs in the Indigenous communities and the First Nation communities, and also other community members in the Indigenous communities, that this is something that they wanted to see.
This change will take effect on April 1st. It gives child welfare agencies time to get ready to do business in a way that they haven't been doing business previously. These birth alerts are attached to an expectant mother's health file. So when she gives birth, child welfare authorities are notified. Oftentimes it leads to these babies being apprehended right from the hospital at just several hours old. Manitoba has the highest rate of kids in care, 11,000 kids in care at any given time in this province, 90% of whom are Indigenous, and many are taken on a birth alert. They estimate it's one a day that are taken on these birth alerts here in Manitoba. Stefanson said that a review of these birth alerts shows that they didn't work anyways.
So we conducted a review of the birth alert process, and what we found is that there's no evidence to prove that this is that increases the safety of children in any way.
Stefanson said that this is just one part of a massive overhaul to child welfare delivery here in Manitoba. She said that ending these birth alerts, they hope, will set up expectant mothers with the supports already in the community to hopefully keep the children with the mothers instead of taking the kids and then working backwards to get the kids back with these families. Often that never happens.
What we're trying to do is certainly developing those plans, the birthing plans with mums and with families, and there are programs that exist now out there. So what we want to do is try and build back that trust within the community to ensure that we can point them towards these programs that are working.
Melissa Ridgen, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
This announcement makes Manitoba only the second province in Canada to end birth alerts. British Columbia did so last September. We'll have more reaction to this news tomorrow, and you can find more on this story on our website, aptnnews.ca. An undisclosed settlement has been reached between the Indigenous woman at the center of a widely criticized interrogation video and the RCMP. Last June, Aidan Withers filed a lawsuit against the West Kelowna RCMP and the officer who questioned her. The incident occurred in 2012 when Withers was just 17 years old. She was interrogated for more than 2 hours by RCMP Constable Kent Hall after reporting an alleged sexual assault. In the video, the officer asks Withers, quote, "Were you at all turned on during this?" unquote. In a statement to APTN, the RCMP say they are pleased to have reached a settlement with Withers and, quote, "This incident highlighted the importance for the RCMP to continue to review and update our sexual assault investigative training practices and policies." Wet'suwet'en Hereditary Chiefs and the Union of B.C. Indian Chiefs say the RCMP is using improper and unlawful actions in enforcing a checkpoint on Wet'suwet'en territory. At a press conference today in Vancouver, they called on the Civilian Review and Complaints Commission for the RCMP to investigate the actions of officers at the checkpoint. The complaint includes 8 first-hand accounts of inconsistent actions by police, as some people are being turned away at the checkpoint. Grand Chief Stuart Phillip called on Premier John Horgan to meet with Wet'suwet'en Hereditary Chiefs.
John Horgan has vehemently and adamantly refused to meet with the Hereditary Chiefs. We find that response highly unacceptable. It's irresponsible, and we're calling upon Premier Horgan to get off his high horse and know and understand it's part of his responsibilities to do his utmost to de-escalate a very dangerous and volatile situation.
Meanwhile, at the police checkpoint on Maurice West Forest Service Road in Wet'suwet'en Territory, 3 police cars are now blocking the road and are not letting media through at this time. APTN News has been allowed by police to go through the checkpoint until today. There have been concerns that police will be increasing their presence in the area to enforce the injunction that allows Coastal Gas to do work on the pipeline being built in the area. This morning, rush hour commuters in Montreal were met with the makeshift burning blockade created in support of Wet'suwet'en anti-pipeline activists. According to photos in a press release submitted by activists, orange traffic cones were set on fire and a banner was hung over an exit sign. The press release says the blockade was done after Wet'suwet'en anti-pipeline protesters in B.C. called for solidarity actions. A similar traffic disruption happened on January 16th in Montreal. Police there say that there have been no arrests for the incidents and that they are still under investigation. The barricade was cleaned up by 9 a.m., but the banner was still hanging well into the morning. Now, still to come, a huge vote for a First Nation in Ontario this week, and warm weather is already affecting some winter roads.
Hello, I'm Todd Lamoran, and here's what's coming up on Nation to Nation. The federal government says it wants a settlement with kids caught up in the child welfare system. They just need more time. But one NDP MP isn't buying that argument. As well, there's a new Conservative critic of Indigenous services, Gary Vidal, who also defeated Indigenous NDP MP Georgina Dollywah in the October federal elections. I sit down and get to know him and his opinion on Indigenous issues. That's all coming up right after the national news.
Here's a look at Friday's weather forecast, starting on the East Coast. Sunny skies and -4 in Charlottetown, +3 under the sun for Halifax. 13 below with showers in Nain. -10 with snow in Happy Valley Goose Bay. 4 below under sunny skies in Montreal. -11 in Saguenay. 0 with snow for Toronto and London. -5 in flurries in Ottawa. -2 with snow for Thunder Bay and Wawa. 4 below in Sioux Lookout. A mild -3 with flurries for Churchill. +1 in the Paw. -3 for Winnipeg and Gimli with snow. -2 and snow in Brandon. +1 in North Battleford. 3 above in Swift Current and Regina. +2 with snow for Meadow Lake and Buffalo Narrows. Welcome back. Pictou Landing First Nation is getting their harbor back after 50 years of a pulp mill dumping liquid waste into the water. Nova Scotia's 2015 Boat Harbour Act comes into effect tomorrow. A legislation that mandates Northern Pulp can no longer pump liquid waste into Boat Harbour. Fluids will still flow into the water until the end of April as the pipe from the Northern Pulp Mill is flushed out and cleaned. Then the long-term cleanup starts, which is expected to take over 4 years. With the cold of winter, the number of Indigenous people living on the streets of Ottawa is at crisis levels. And the city has called for a state of emergency over housing and homelessness. Jamie Pasha-Gumscum spoke with the city and the Indigenous community on what needs to be done.
Florence Iktuk-Sakchuat moved to Ottawa from Iqaluit because of lack of housing. Now she's desperate.
Please act immediately.
Ottawa Councillor Catherine McKenney agrees and called for a state of emergency with a special emphasis on Indigenous housing and homelessness.
Here in this city, the Indigenous population makes up about 2.5% of our overall population, but we know that it represents about 30% of our homeless population, and that is really something that we should need to be ashamed of. We need to focus on. We have a moral and ethical obligation.
The motion was voted on in council and passed unanimously. Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson said Ottawa is addressing the issue, but they need help from the federal and Ontario government.
We added $15 million to the budget for this year to build more affordable housing. We just came from a meeting a few moments ago with Minister Hussein, who's the federal minister responsible for housing, and I specifically raised the issue of Indigenous peoples who don't have decent, warm places to call home. In particular, I told him we have the largest Inuit population in southern Canada, located right here in Ottawa. So we know we have to do more, and that's why we met with the minister, and I spoke with the provincial minister this week as well. We want all hands on deck because we need all three levels of government working together to get more houses built and shovels in the ground.
60s Scoop survivor Daniel Elvis Sundown moved to Ottawa in 1986 and has been homeless for years. He says there are solutions, but now the city needs to act.
There are a lot of government buildings out there vacant, doing nothing, just sitting there, rotting. Why don't they take the government buildings, fix them up, shelters?
Florence Ituksakjoat says that here in Ottawa, her rent used to be $750 a month. In January, it was raised to $1,200. She doesn't know how much longer she can pay for her apartment, and she has a message for the mayor.
To act right away, because we people can't freeze outside. We can't. We're living human being. Like, really, are you going to do that to us? We rarely have any resources to get help. And we need resources that can help us.
Mayor Watson said he would like the next federal budget to be themed around housing. Jamie Pashagumskum, APTN National News, Ottawa.
On Friday, the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation will vote on a proposed project that would see nuclear waste buried deep along the shores of Lake Huron. Meetings have been held and information has been distributed in the community, but for some, the decision at hand should be engaged spiritually, culturally, and ancestrally. Elena McDougall has that story.
Waste from Ontario Power Generation-owned nuclear generating stations at Bruce, Pickering and Darlington could be buried 1.2 kilometers inland from the shores of Lake Huron if members of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation consent to a proposed deep geologic repository within their territory. On Friday, the community of approximately 5,000 will cast a binding vote on the project, and there's no telling how the vote will go.
Some people will consider voting yes because of economic development. Well, economic development doesn't save the land.
Other members gathered in ceremony with hope that people will consider the voice of a being who doesn't have a ballot: water.
Pray hard for that water. Teach the young boys, your children, your grandchildren, and those ones yet to come, how to pray for that water each and every day. And like this little one here, I'm so grateful that he's here. It brings joy to my heart to know that we may not think they're not listening, but they are listening.
In 2013, Ontario Power Generation committed to Saugeen Ojibwe Nation that the proposed deep geological repository project would not proceed without their consent. Last year, OPG hosted 22 information sessions in the communities, and in response to concerns about water, OPG issued the following statement. The DGR would isolate the waste 68 meters underground in impermeable rock that has been isolated from any lake or groundwater for millions of years. The DGR would be 3 times deeper than the lake, but would not be under the lake. It would have no connection with the lake.
The company goes on to say,
right now, nuclear waste is safely stored at the surface on an interim basis in buildings about 1.2 kilometers from Lake Huron. Putting the waste in a deep repository is a lasting solution, one that protects people, the lake, and the environment. It is the right thing to do for future generations. Jessica Kishig-Martin has studied the information. For her, Indigenous knowledge and ceremony will have the final say.
We have a proposed project before us that we need to make a decision on, but we need to be provided the opportunity to look at all of the options. And part of this work today is about listening to the water, to hear what Nebe Manado is telling us to do.
APTN will be watching for the outcome of the vote as it unfolds in the days ahead. Elena McDougall, APTN National News, Saugeen.
Concern is growing in northwestern Ontario after unseasonably warm weather started affecting the winter road network. There are 34 communities in Anishinaabe Nation accessible only by plane and by winter road. The winter road season is often short and depends heavily on cold weather for thick ice. Anishinaabe Nation Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler said the roads are usually open right now, but that isn't happening. Thin ice means the semi-trailers that bring in supplies cannot travel. That means things could get even more costly for the north.
At least 12 more inches of ice, for example, before they can haul full loads of fuel into their communities. It's going to have a huge financial impact on them. Many communities now are running out of fuel, for example, their fuel supply for the year. And if they can't haul it in by winter road soon, they will have to fly it in.
Time for another quick break, and then we're off to Colville Lake. Stick around. Here's the rest of Friday's weather forecast. Piggyback up in northern Alberta, +2 in high level under sunny skies, 0 for Peace River, 11 above in Medicine Hat, 1 degree warmer for Lethbridge, +11 with showers in Vancouver and Tofino, 14 above with rain in Victoria, +7 in Prince George with rain, -5 in Fort Nelson, 27 below for Old Crow, -30 with flurries for Rock River, -8 under sunny skies in Fort Liard and Trout Lake, snow and 14 below for Yellowknife, snow and -29 in Sax Harbor, 28 below in Pawatuck, -21 for Baker Lake, 15 below with flurries in Repulse Bay, -39 in Resolute, 35 below in Arctic Bay. Welcome back. Recently, APTN aired a story on a community in the Northwest Territories in dire need of a new school. But residents there say a lack of resources will not keep them from educating themselves. Our reporter Charlotte Mort-Jacobs spent time in the community of Colville Lake, where family stories are being recorded on paper for the first time. Here's a look.
Kambamitu, Colville Lake, a fly-in community of 140 primarily Satugotna Dene, located 80 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle in the Northwest Territories. There are issues: an aging school, high costs of living, and youth suicide, to name a few. Like many of the 33 communities across the NWT, locally published works illustrating the uniqueness and resiliency of the people here are not widely available. Until recently. Jed Couchant is being recognized along with his peers for contributing a story about his Dene hero, his grandfather.
He was born in August of 1923 in Fort Goodhoe. His parents raised him around the Mackenzie River. Sometimes he would stay with his grandpa.
The latest of the Dene Heroes of the Saugeen, Volume 4, saw 40 contributors to the book's publication.
It's important for people to hear what you say, and Dene people, and what they all say.
And it's intergenerational, with authors ranging from 12 to 35 years old.
Look, baby.
For Isabel Orleus, it's about passing on knowledge to her children.
I just wanted to write a story for them to read, to show them my perspective of being their mother and all the things that I want for them. So you would plead in the middle. And
Orleus also wrote about her gratitude to her grandparents for teaching her how to sew and to honor the hardships they faced.
Yeah, my grandfather worked on one of the mines in Delaney, and I think he would only get paid 20 cents a day or something, and they would be hauling the ore bags.
This book gives the Dene people a voice and a place in Canadian literature.
The books have been self-funded. In 2018, the project won a $100,000 Arctic Inspiration Prize. For David Coetzee, who penned a story for Volume 3, the project was to motivate community members to dig deep into their history.
one of the things I've seen as growing up and going to school is that there was no resources for our own people to be taught in the school. So this was the whole reason for the book, is that we have to add our own histories into the classes.
The books can be found in Sahtu school libraries and housed in several NWT public libraries.
I just felt happy that people were going to be reading my book, reading the book, and my page, my story was going to be in there.
With many future stories just waiting to be written. Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Colville Lake.
Beautiful sky. Idle No More galvanized Indigenous resistance across Canada. Producers Tim Fontaine and Rick Harp dug into the movement that changed Turtle Island. In a special two-part documentary airing on APTN's streaming service Lumi and on APTN Investigates coming up tomorrow night, you can hear about how it all happened and what it meant. Here's a preview.
So let's take a look at Teresa Spence's hunger strike and what significance that had.
You know what, as some people said, it was kind of a galvanizing focus. She became the face of the movement, rightly or wrongly. In fact, she seemed inspired by the movement, but I mean, she wasn't an official partner, or the founder said, you know, she's doing her thing. It's up to her for her reasons, and we support those reasons, but she's not part and parcel of our effort. So it was interesting, people just, you know, staking out their different, not turfs, but just saying, look, this is what we're about, this is what she's about, this is what the Chiefs are about. So it was very interesting, and yet a lot of the sort of direct action tactics that were employed, blockades of rails and roads, explicitly cited her example. Yeah. So that's what was so interesting about Idle No More. It was like, it's like you have all these ingredients that come together to just make something, but you know what I mean? The whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and that's what was so fascinating about it.
Yeah, there were a lot of different people carrying the banner of Idle No More at that time, but she absolutely became one of the most well-known people doing so, I think. And it also, I think one of the things that one of the people we talked to said was that her involvement put a timeline on Idle No More then. It became a ticking... Urgency, and there was an urgency to it now that something had to be done.
You won't want to miss that or the documentary. Worth getting Lumi. That's your APTN National News for this Thursday. For the latest, including much more on the end of birth alerts in Manitoba and the settlement reached between an Indigenous woman and the RCMP in Kelowna, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. Now, stick around. Todd Lamarand is up next with Nation to Nation. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you back here tomorrow.